welcome to Masters of Divinity. I'm your moderator, JP. And I am here with Father Chuck.
What's up?
And Father Fun is with us once again.
Hey.
And he's going to be with us for the entirety of Music Mayhem. We hope. If we can get all of us together on time. And Matt is on his way. He is going to be here. This is not an occasional Matt moment. He is going to be here. So it's kind of a miracle. All four of us will be here at once 2 weeks in a row. So stand by for Matt. So it's Music Mayhem. It's the first episode of Music Mayhem. This is our fourth, right?
Yes, I believe so.
And I chose Nirvana's Nevermind as our first album. So I kind of want to preface this episode. I told these guys that I wanted to do something a bit different this time around. Usually we really get into like kind of analytical weeds during Music Mayhem. We really try to get into the headspace of the performers and the artists, and we try to really divine the lyrics and go line by line. What do they mean? What does it all mean, Basil? Right? This time around, I didn't really want to do that. I really wanted to let the music speak for itself. And I wanted to focus more on how people, how we all felt about the music, personally. What we were experiencing, and sort of engage with it on that level. But if there were like things about Kurt, about the band, and about the music, it's fine to share that. I'm not going to be like, don't share any trivia, because I probably will. Can't help it. Lifelong fan. So yeah, we're kind of taking that approach to it, which I think is going to be interesting, a bit more fun. And because of that, I actually didn't do much research at all, honestly, aside from. I did watch this really great documentary on HBO called Montage of Heck, which is a documentary about Kurt Cobain, but it's not a documentary like searching for answers. It's sort of like, it actually is kind of like a montage. It's a lot of animation, a lot of exploring his music and his journals, and kind of a sort of more of a voyeuristic view of Kurt and Courtney and his life and stuff, and really revealing and interesting. And highly recommend it. If you have HBO Go, check it out. So that's really that, and listening to the album like a handful of times is pretty much all I did to prepare. And it was a bit freeing.
I like it partly because, like, analyzing lyrics. I don't know why I had trouble saying that.
Lyrical analysis is what you're
lyrical analysis.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is it's something that we do, but it's sort of unduly emphasized in a lot of music conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I was struck by reading a few things about Kurt Cobain. Really just like I shouldn't say reading a few things about Kurt Cobain. Reading the Wikipedia page, that he sort of did not like the fact that people analyze his lyrics so much. He thought that was kind of stupid, and he in a lot of cases, even with Nirvana, with Nevermind. I'm not sure how it was with In Utero, but with Nevermind, I mean, he was writing lyrics up until like the moment he had to record them.
Yeah.
That was not his primary thing in this, and that he wanted the music to be more the thing you paid attention to than any kind of lyrical bit. So I think it's fitting for this album to talk about that. And I kind of like it's freeing because, of all the songs in this record, I've listened to Teen Spirit more times than I can count, probably as most people.
1 billion views on YouTube. Yeah.
Wow. But like I've listened to the lyrics and I've tried to make sense of it over the years, and I just like I'm like, I don't see the point. And even Kurt was like, there really is no point.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to be freed from that feeling of basically a person who approached songwriting similarly to the way that John Lennon did when he did like I Am the Walrus, which was just like intentionally, vague nonsense type stuff, just to have fun with the people who overemphasize that kind of thing.
So you think about like what they say about, or like I heard this thing about Don McLean that like he like very quickly after American Pie he just would get so pissed at people who would try to figure it out and would ask him what it meant and everything, and he just finally was just, I'm never talking about it again. Like, I'm just not going to do that.
There he is,
Officer Matt.
Occasional Matt is here.
Look who's on twice in a row, guys. Twice in a row.
He's got a streak.
Yep. Nice.
He's on a roll.
I think too, this will allow us to talk about this in a different way, because I think the musical choices that were made in the songwriting in terms of the kind of layering of musical genres and things that are going on is just as important to talk about.
Well, I think I know his process. The reason why he's always like, if you watch interviews, there's countless interviews with him, and people are always like, "What does this song mean? What does this song mean?" He's like, "I don't know." He's like, "I'm just as lost as you are," but that's because most of his lyrics come from poetry that he wrote in his journals. And so it's like, if he's writing a song, he'd go back to his journals and just like look through, like find whatever sounds good and just like plug it in. And he's like, and when I wrote those poems, I didn't really, it just like sounded good. Like they not really a theme. There's nothing thematic going on. I'm just kind of putting in there, and in other interviews, like when people are talking about like what they feel like he's trying to do, he looks so bored. And he's finally just, and in one interview I saw, he's just like, I just want to know what you think. I just want to know what the fans think. I don't care about like these reporters spewing nonsense. So I want to honor that. And I think it's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to what you guys thought and felt listening to Nevermind.
So, JP.
Yes, Chuck.
Why did you pick Nirvana's Nevermind as your album, the first album of Music Mayhem this year?
It's
right out the gate.
I didn't feel like I was setting much of a precedent, but it is interesting. In order to, as the first one, but I feel like this is our fourth Music Mayhem, and I feel like I've just been dancing around it since the beginning. And I've written so much notes here, and like under where it says "Why Nirvana," I write in really big words, "Why not?" And why did I avoid it? And I think it's because I've just been too scared of being on the nose. Am I revealing too much of who I am? I will say right out the bat that this is my last 90s album I'll ever choose for Music Mayhem. I promise. Because every single one has been from the 90s.
Yeah, I was thinking that the last time that we talked about a record that was your choice with Father Fun on the show was when you picked Foo Fighters' Color and the Shape.
Yeah.
And I referred to Foo Fighters as the Adam Sandler of rock and roll. And like, this is something you deeply love, and so you're putting yourself out there once again with something that you deeply love.
I know, but I have more confidence this time.
Oh, and by the way, hi, Father Fun again.
Hey, Matt. I thought you were maybe referring to me as being on twice in a row, since it's your podcast, and so I just assumed you're on all the time.
You've been on more than me in the last couple of years. So don't worry about it. You're doing fine. Carry on.
So JP, so you picked Nirvana's Nevermind. Well, you picked Nirvana.
Yeah.
Why not? And that makes sense, right? Your favorite band. It's something I've known about you since the moment I met you, that you loved Nirvana. I'm curious now. The next question is, why Nevermind? Why not In Utero or Bleach?
That's a great question.
Or Unplugged.
And you know what? In Utero and Unplugged were two that floated that I floated before choosing Nevermind. Unplugged because just beautiful skills on display, right? In Utero because wow, sad. And like, I mean, if I were to actually analyze an album by Nirvana, it would be In Utero, because I think it's the last one he recorded before he died, basically. That was recorded and put out before he committed suicide. And I think a lot of people find, like, if you listen to that, you're like, oh yeah, I can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I didn't choose that, though, is because I just feel like that is a more analytical. I feel like it would be too much of a temptation to analyze that album. I didn't want to focus on his suicide. I didn't want to focus on his death or his depression. I wanted to focus on him as an artist, and I feel like Nevermind is perfect for that because, it's the one that changed everything.
Yeah, I mean, the release of that album was probably akin to the Beatles showing up in the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was, as one other rock journalist I've heard said that the moment you hear the drum kick in Teen Spirit, you're hearing music change forever.
Yeah, dude.
That's not really an understatement at all.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you picked this album for our discussion because we've talked some big albums on this show, but we've not hit anything this big.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a record that I think because of its impact, listening to it now, it's sort of hard to hear that because we live in, the world after it. And I think probably a lot of kids listening to this record now would probably be like, I don't see what the big deal was.
Probably.
But I'm hoping we'll be able to talk a little bit about that too, because that's the thing that really fascinates me with this conversation is why this record had the impact that it did when arguably it's not the best of Nirvana's output. It's arguably not even the best grunge record that was produced of its time.
Probably.
Right? There were other bands doing what they were doing probably better, but for whatever reason, this album was the one that resonated. Like I read something where like Soundgarden were like sitting there and they're like, whoa, why did they what happened? How come they're up the charts? Like we've been doing this for a while. Like what happened?
Yeah, I think Nirvana synthesized it more, is what I think happened.
Yeah.
So can I just talk about like my journey as a Nirvana fan to become a Nirvana fan and like
absolutely
growing up, I've kind of known about Nirvana my whole life because I used to watch MTV when I was a little kid. Like when my parents were away and my sister took care of me, we watched MTV together. That was what we did. And Nirvana, I was always like afraid of them. Like they seemed so dangerous and like, we talked about this in the Green Day episode. Like, there's kind of a drug culture involved and it's very sad, kind of angry. It was really my vibe, when I was a kid, right?
Hey, JP, before you continue,
Yeah.
Can I just do a quick age check on everybody?
Okay. I'm 36. I was born in 83. Yeah.
I'm 38. I was born in 82.
36, born in 84.
Cool.
So we're all technically older millennials or like the Zennial generation.
wait.
We were all in
your
elementary
age.
school. Oh, I'm 36. Sorry, I said 83.
Yeah. The way I look at it is
June.
like older millennials, zennials, we went to school with Generation X and we lived in their shadows.
Mm-hmm. So we were all in like 4th or 5th grade in 91. Does that sound right?
No, I was in 4th grade in 94. That was like when he killed himself. So I was still fairly young.
Oh yeah, that's right. We would have been third or 4th grade or 2nd or 3rd grade. Okay. So we were still really young to have heard it.
Yeah.
Like when it first came out. Okay.
Okay.
So it existed before our.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So sorry, you were saying dangerous.
Yeah, I always saw them as dangerous when I was a kid, and I had a best friend when I was like 10 years old who loved Nirvana, and he was obsessed with like being cool because he had a lot of money, and he always kind of flaunted this. He had a 14 karat gold copy of Nevermind. And he'd be like, you need to listen to music like this, JP, if you want to be cool. And I was like, I don't know, man. This is like, it was like asking me to do drugs. You know what I mean? I just want to watch Power Rangers. So years go by, and like I'm kind of going through middle school, like, and the scene is still kind of happening even after like Kurt Cobain's death, right? And so like the kids who picked on me in middle school, they weren't jocks. I never had a problem with jocks. They never bothered me. But the grunge kids were merciless towards me, and they all loved Nirvana. and like they wore Nirvana shirts, and they had like the Kurt Cobain hairstyles. When I look at when I looked at Kurt Cobain and Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic, like I saw bullies at that age. I think in college that they released "You Know You're Right," and that song was like in heavy rotation. I really liked it, and that's kind of when I bought my poster, my Kurt Cobain poster that got blessed. And I also I kind of got really sucked into the Courtney Love conspiracy theory that she murdered Kurt Cobain. And what's interesting, the reason why I bring that up is because I think, like, I'll get to that in a minute. Then after that, well into college, I hadn't become friends with Chuck just yet, but Matt and I were friends. I got really into The Crow. I went through a Crow phase.
Guys. When he says really into The Crow, he means really.
But I do want to point out, I didn't put on any makeup or anything like that. Like I did not. Didn't wrap myself in electrical tape or anything.
He wants to hang out tonight. Great, get to hear about The Crow kind of scenario. So just
we went on a road trip. We went on a road trip up to. He was like
Chuck, thank God you didn't know him yet, and that you met him after The Crow. But I'm done. I won't interrupt you anymore. But carry on.
So you're saying that JP was as into The Crow.
About how he died filming The Crow. But carry on. Go ahead. Father Fun, please.
I was saying that you're saying that JP is as into The Crow as Chuck is into Keelan. Is that kind of a thing?
Nice.
Probably.
Well played. Slow clap.
Wow.
Well played,
Wow,
Father Fun.
Solid burn. Both of us. Jeez. Got us both.
Yeah, solid burn. But Father Fun, to put it into perspective, I would say no. Take about one step further, and that was JP and The Crow.
Hey, well, if I took it one step further, I would have been wearing the makeup, which I didn't do. But that's probably
no. I think you were so close to that. JP.
Here's a question,
so
JP.
Yeah.
Let's get real. 100% right now.
Okay.
Did you ever put on the makeup in a bathroom mirror and look at yourself?
No, I've never put the makeup on in my life.
Never even tried it.
No, you know why? You know why, Chuck? Because I thought I was too fat. That's why.
Okay.
Why
does this make me feel bad?
Sadly, that just
yeah.
wiped out.
Did you ever paint your
sucking
nails?
Out of that conversation.
No, but I did wear. I did go to Hot Topic and bought some spiked bracelets once, and Matt made fun of me a lot for that. Because I was because of spiked bracelets, but because I was also wearing khakis.
Yes, I did not make fun of him in the same way the grunge kids did. I made fun of him for not committing. It wasn't about wearing the spike bracelets. It was like, JP, if you're going to do it, go for it, man. Come on. And he wouldn't commit one way or the other. So it was like seeing Xander from Buffy wear spike bracelets. It didn't work.
Hey, can we please at some point do an episode on mid-90s mall culture?
Totally.
Because
we're gonna do an episode on The Crow too. Let's not.
Hell yeah!
I've never seen it. I've never seen that movie.
Okay, well, you do need to see it, but at the same time, when you see it, you'll probably be on my side, not JP's.
This is
quick draw. He's just like.
we went to.
He didn't
just off camera. He's just.
It's right here in my DVD collection.
See, that reminds me of the JP we're talking about because he was probably carrying it on his person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just in case somebody said, I've never seen it. I kind of want to. Well, I've got it right here.
And this is a copy that I bought when we would go to the mall and we hung out at those like record DVD shops, and I just saw there and I just grabbed it, and like that's when it started. And I even still have notes from when I did a visual storytelling class presentation. I did a little presentation on the music of The Crow. They're still in there.
All right, now that segues over, continue, JP.
So
so never mind.
So it really was just a phase. Like I went through it, and then all of a sudden I was just bored of The Crow. But I listened to the soundtrack from The Crow and got really into that. And the music on the soundtrack is awesome, by the way. It's like one of the first like alt rock soundtracks, so it kind of made history because it has like Nine Inch Nails and like The Cure and a bunch of other cool bands of that time. so I was still like into the music. It kind of put me into like a 90s mood for a while. And because at the time I was like, what's more 90s than Nirvana? Like, let's keep this 90s ball rolling. And just started listening to more Nirvana. And, you know, I was away from my parents living in college. So when I was in high school, I wouldn't be able to do this. So I just started to listen to the music. And I bought the 20th anniversary album that had the You Know You're Right song, which I loved at the time. And of course, there's also the mystique of the Courtney Love conspiracy theory that was also kind of part of it a little bit, I have to admit. But the interesting thing about that is that, like, by focusing so much on the rebelliousness and the 90s aesthetic and also sort of the 70s aesthetic, which I was starting to get into at the time as well, you know, I wasn't really identifying with the kind of what was kind of driving his music, which was his depression, the feelings of alienation, you know, deep things like that. I wasn't connecting with it, but I think I was doing it on purpose because I was sort of in denial of my own feelings at the time, because I love Nirvana. They were becoming my favorite band, but I was part of me was kind of afraid to be like, you know, I'm going to a Christian school and someone's going to ask me, what's your favorite band? Nirvana. Like, oh, steer clear from that kid, you know? But I think on a subconscious level, I was connecting with it, you know? I started going to therapy and I started just kind of being more open about what I liked. And I just kind of suddenly was like, I'm flying that Nirvana flag. This is my favorite band. I love them. And, you know, at the time I was looking for like an identity, as most people are at that age. This is my sophomore year in college. I was looking for an identity. I was looking for something that was revolutionary. And to me, that's just what Nirvana represented. Not just the pain, but also to like make waves, to break down walls and evolve. And plus they only had like 3 albums, so like they're really easy to get into. And that's kind of what I started to kind of get into other like grunge bands. And I started to get into punk. I started listening to the Pixies and Bikini Kill, and you know, started learning about the Shags and stuff. And I think more recently I've been able to embrace them because I've started to learn more about depression and how to live with it. They are becoming more, not just like I listen to them because they make me depressed or whatever, or they there's like some kind of answer to it. No, they help me get through it. They help me see the other side of the day, I guess you could say. Like when they kind of, I can hang out with them until the weather clears, if that makes any sense. And so like I'm going full on. I'm #1 Nirvana fan, #1 band of all time, hearing loud, more than Foo Fighters, and I love this album more than Color and the Shape. So that's my journey with Kurt Cobain and becoming a Nirvana fan.
So at this point, should I hand this back over to you to moderate all of us, JP?
Oh, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
JP's got to moderate this one.
Yeah. I want to ask, I know I kind of went long, but I do want to know, like, sort of what your initial thoughts are about Nirvana, just in general. And I'd like to start with Father Fun, if he doesn't mind.
Just everybody's going to say everything I want.
I can't remember the first time I can consciously remember hearing Nirvana, but I do have this memory of the Unplugged, the video of Unplugged.
Yeah.
And just hearing or seeing and hearing that his pain as he sings the Mary, 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 Mary line from whatever that is.
Was it
the song from In Utero.
Lake of Fire? Is that Mary?
No, Mary, not Glycerine. Anyway, it's like the very end of
Lithium.
Unplugged. Lithium.
Oh, yeah. Lithium, yeah. Okay, I know what you mean.
And just being...
It's all apologies. Actually, I think it's all apologies.
Oh, right, yeah.
All apologies.
My bad.
Yeah, just seeing, like, he had, like, I can have that, like, image of him strumming the acoustic guitar and, like, does the pain and, like... that's like seared into my brain for some reason, and like early, you know, I don't think I've ever I really like Weird Al, and so I'm familiar with It Smells Like Nirvana. I like Nirvana, but I've never had really like strong opinions about Nirvana. You know, when you were going through all of your kind of Nirvana discovery stuff, or really around the time when I was in high school, I was mostly listening to 70s hard rock stuff. Okay. And I never would turn off Nirvana, but I also wasn't, I never really sought it out. You know, I have some thoughts about this album, having listened to it really for the first time for this. But I can save those for later. Yeah, I mean, like I'm pro Nirvana. I'm thankful for their contribution to music. I'm a little annoyed by the aesthetic of Gen X, but I'm glad that they finally got a voice and that they started the downfall of the boomers. But yeah.
Okay.
I could have done without the Foo Fighters personally as an offshoot, but you know, it's fine.
It happens.
Yeah.
How about you, Chuck?
So, similar, somewhat of a. So, you know, I grew up in this very conservative Christian upbringing, like at least three of us did, and I can remember when I grew up in this double wide trailer for a while. My mom would go to work and I would stay home. It was like the age like when I was like, you know, 12, 13, like I could stay home by myself. And for the summers, like my mom would go to work all day, and so I'd be home alone during the summer and just, you know, fending for myself, you know, I mean, you know, that kind of thing. And that's when I discovered MTV and VH1. I discovered music videos, and I thought they were super cool, and I felt like I was like growing up by discovering this and listening and learning that I liked, you know, music. I was like when we got a CD player, I bought my first CDs. My first CDs were Weird Al's Food album. We have to do a Weird Al episode, by the way. Weird Al's Food album, Michael Jackson's History. Those are like my first two records. And then I bought like movie soundtracks and things, like Jurassic Park soundtrack, Lion King, things like that. So like, and then I was into like All for One for a while, like Boys to Men kind of thing. But then once I started kind of developing my own music tastes, through discovering MTV, things started to change for me. So obviously this was like past, you know, Kurt Cobain's death. This is after that time. Yeah. But I can remember, you know, Alone, you know, by the way, I forgot to mention that, like, and I've said this in the past, I know, but like watching MTV was like verboten. It was like, that was something you were not allowed to do in my religious upbringing. It was bad. It was wrong. It was evil. It was devilish. Right. So like I had to do this secret. Like this is a secret thing that I had for many years of my life of just watching music videos. And I can remember watching and seeing the video for Teen Spirit for the first time and just sort of having this feeling of like, what is this?
Yeah. Because
the only rock that I had heard up to that point was, you know, Christian rock. I got into, I mean, what got me into the Christian rock was actually Green Day, because my buddy Josh and I would go to an ice skating rink, and they used to play a bunch of popular songs over the ice skating rink, and Basket Case would play, and we loved Basket Case. That was such a cool song. I knew I could never own their album, but one day when I was at a Christian bookstore, I was checking out some things, and I discovered MXPX, which became one of my favorite bands. And through them, I discovered like a whole world through the Tooth and Nail Records label, like this whole world of different musical genres that just sort of blew my mind. And so I started to, you know, figure out things that I liked. And then I'm also watching MTV on the sly, and that was the only way that I could consume secular music. And so like I can remember like Teen Spirit came on, and I was just like blown away by this sound, and just like knew that this was an awesome band. I caught Unplugged, you know, one point on like a rerun or whatever, and that to me, I still think that that's the strongest thing Nirvana's put out is their Unplugged session. So I was just really into it, to the point that when I turned 16 and I got my own car, which was a hand-me-down Chevy Astro van, the first thing I did after I dropped my mom off at our house, and was going to drive by myself for the first time. And what I did was I immediately went to the record store at the mall, West Oaks Mall in Orlando, buddy. Went to the record store, and I bought Green Day's Nimrod, Nirvana's Nevermind, and one other album I can't remember. That was the first secular music that I ever bought that I didn't have to like try to hide from someone. And I listened to Nevermind a few times, but it was one of those things. By that point, I just went through to like the hits, right? Like I just went through to Teen Spirit and Come As You Are, things like that. And to the point that I never really paid much attention to the record for many, many years, even really up until we listened to it for this time around. And I remember even saying to you the first day, I was like, the songs in my mind, I just remember the songs between the hits not being very strong. And I will get into it a bit, but I was very much wrong listening to it this time around. But anyway, just getting back to the main point here, that what I remember about Nirvana, what I feel about Nirvana was that they were kind of different in that, like, even never having, even kind of watching MTV after they had already been a thing, I was just from the video of Teen Spirit, I think I was always kind of aware that there was a trailblazer element to who they were. And so I was just really, I sort of gravitated to that sense of that they were very definitive for a generation. And I, grew up, my cousin Leanne is very much a Gen X person. Like she's sort of tail end of Gen X because she's a few years older than me. But I always was sort of like, I always looked up to her and her musical taste as being mature and grown up when I was a teenager. And like Nirvana was something that I know she listened to, so I it had that element of me participating in something that was older and more grown up, than what I saw around me all the time. And so like, I just think about that. And I just think about growing up in the mid 90s, coming of age in the skateboarding world and all of that stuff that I was into during that time. And just, these are all the sounds and textures and aesthetics from this very formative part of my life that I have very, very positive and fond feelings for. And I associate them with, independence. This was me becoming my own person and making my own decisions around tastes and other things that I often had to fight for. Or I had to hide. And so those are the feelings that I have with Nirvana.
Cool. Matt?
All right, well, first, let me start with this statement. I'm going to take a page from JP's book right now that I just realized the genius of what he's doing. So sorry, JP, but I'm totally calling you out on camera.
All right.
And I'm going to continue to talk, but I'm going to disappear from view for a second and explain my reason. So hold on, because I'm still here talking to you, and it's like a magic trick right now. But what I just realized is
he's getting
why
his copy of The Crow
is wearing sunglasses, and you are my hero right now because I am overly aware of where my eyes are, because I don't know if I should be looking at the camera or the person talking, and I'm losing my freaking mind. So JP just saved my life. So forgive me while I put sunglasses on.
Okay.
And second of all, for the sake of me, because I'm the last to go, and for the listener who's probably like, I don't even remember what the heck we're talking about, JP, can you repeat your original question?
I just want to know
what
your thoughts are on Nirvana, man. Like, what is your history with them? Like, what is,
right.
Just tell me what you think about Nirvana.
So, 100% true story, full disclosure, and not joking because we're on a podcast together and this is the four of us hanging out having fun. My history with Nirvana is I probably wouldn't be as into it as I am if it weren't for JP, who's on the podcast right now. He had very much to do with me listening to it, and it, in a funny way, goes very hand in hand with what we were joking about with his obsession with Crow and with the music in Crow and with making me watch the movie Crow, I think twice together. But anyway,
could have sworn it was more, but okay.
Actually, it was only twice.
It's definitely one of those things where it's like Matt is on his way, and I'd have it. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here. It happens to be on right now.
I didn't know you'd be here.
It's
just playing in the background. Do you want to hang out and watch the movie?"
Continue.
But I probably wouldn't be into Nirvana as a band as much as I am if it weren't for him. I say that, but then I also say I am notorious, and JP knows this for a fact because out of all the people on this podcast, he's known me for the longest. I am notorious for being absolutely obsessed with songs and not having a clue who's singing them. So I'll be like, for example, I spent probably 2 years of my life saying I can't stand the band Green Day. I can't stand them. I can't stand them. I can't stand them. But every time a song came on, I was like, oh, I like this. Who's singing it? And somebody would go, oh, that's Green Day. And I was finally like, oh, I get it. I like Green Day. I just didn't realize I liked them. So I would have probably been a Nirvana fan if it weren't for JP, but I wouldn't know who they were if it weren't for JP. So that's the way I'll put it, is JP is very influential in my knowledge, understanding of who Nirvana is, what they were doing, and why they were doing it. Apart from that, I will say my experience with them is probably going to begin to lead us into other discussions JP wants to lead into, I'm thinking, but I don't know. But I'm just going to say, I will put it this way and I'll leave it at this because everybody else has said it so much better than me. So what I will say is JP said we're going to do the album Nevermind. Last night was the first opportunity I had to click play and start listening to it. When I clicked play, my immediate reaction was to start texting JP because it's his fault I'm listening to this, and it's also a blessing that I'm listening to this and it's his fault still. So I clicked play, and my immediate response was to text him and say, I put Apple AirPod Pros in my ear, which I'm test driving, quote unquote, for my father because he bought them and he's trying to decide which pair he wants to keep, these or something else. So I get to be the one to try them out. And by the way, they're awesome, but that's a side note. I said, and I realized that goes totally against the whole fighting against the man theme of everything we're getting ready to listen to with grunge and alternative rock. But I said, but I put them in my ears, I hit play, the guitar riff started. Then I wrote with every word starting capital letter on purpose. And that was, and then the drum kick kicked in. And then all caps, and then the lyrics started. And then I was like, and then I was gone and nothing else mattered. So I sat there, hit play, started listening, and I was completely 100% caught up from the second it started in the music to a point where I was like, I'm done for the night. I'm sitting right here. I'm listening to this till it's done. And I told JP I can't wait till I wake up tomorrow to start it over again. And as all of you know, because of our group message, I may or may not have listened to it all the way through 3 or 4 times since this morning.
It is a breeze to get through, I will say that.
But I click play. Yeah, in all honesty, the album flies by quickly, which I was thankful for, and at the same time upset with, and that about sums up my thought. But here's my last thing I will say, and I'm hoping this will lead into other stuff JP wants to talk about. But the second the music started, and the second I started texting him, I said, before even track 1 was done, I told him, Smells Like Teen Spirit by itself as one track, which is track 1 on this album, I said I would argue that this is the Citizen Kane of music. And what I mean is, for the younger generation, because as Father Fun perfectly drew attention to, we're all old now. Sorry, guys, but we're old and we're getting older. I said as the younger generation would say, they may or may not have even heard that song all the way through, at least not realize they've heard it, because I'm sure it's played in the background. But they may have never listened to Nirvana. But I said, I would argue that this one song by itself is the Citizen Kane of music, because you may not have heard it, but you've 100% heard it, in the sense that everything you've listened to since that track by itself has come out has been influenced, affected, and changed by the track Smells Like Teen Spirit. Yeah. That entirely shifted the course of music in the same way that Citizen Kane, for those of you, again, younger generation that's like, you keep saying Citizen Kane like I know what it is. Like the movie Citizen Kane is argued as being the greatest movie of all time, not because it's the best movie ever made, but because nothing we have today would exist if Citizen Kane wasn't made, is the same way I would argue that Smells Like Teen Spirit is. And that's only track 1 on this album. So my experience with Nirvana is I would have loved them, but I never would have known who they were if it weren't for JP. And now that I love them and know who they are, and am now, 900 years attached from this album because I feel like I'm ancient, listening to it again went, yeah, I forgot how much they single-handedly shifted the course of music.
Well, Matt, I mean, you think about it, Matt, like, I think the number 1 rock single the week before this came out was like something by Winger. Right?
Yeah,
like,
I think Whitney Houston was at the top of the charts when.
Who is Winger? But that's a different.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, they're like hair metal. Like hair metal was like it was like jock rock hair metal type stuff that was like all over the charts at that time, and that's what people associated rock music with.
Yeah.
And it was stale. It was overdone. And then here come these 3 kids from Seattle with really crappy speakers, play like with the volume turned up way too loud to make this really dirty, ugly sound, and then suddenly that was everything on the radio.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, and I'll even put it this way. And I realize, again, like I said, grunge and alternative and rock all have this whole like fight against the man thing. So even by mentioning this goes against all of that. But there's a multi-billion-dollar company out there that is striving to exist, and it is called Sirius XM Radio, that started as 2, formed into 2, has become something so much bigger. They have a station that is entirely devoted to grunge and alternative rock. And the name of the station they chose is Lithium. Mm-hmm. And there is not a mistake to believe that they didn't choose the word lithium because it is the title of this album. So I would argue that everything in history shifted in the 90s music-wise because of Lithium. And that's why they chose it. And that's where we're at today. And JP picked it, and I hit play, and I've listened to it 5 times since.
Matt, the album's title is Nevermind.
Yeah.
Nevermind. Lithium.
Lithium is one of the songs. So it's...
One of the songs. Totally undermined the fact that, again, I wouldn't even know the band's name if it weren't for JP. So thanks for drawing attention to the fact that I 100% confess that and then showed my stupidity.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So guys, let's talk about some songs. We could probably skip the first one because it's not very good. It's like filler, basically.
Right.
What? Where? I'm just leaving. I'm done.
As I was listening to that one, as it started, I was surprised at how, and I'm very familiar with the song, but like, I was kind of trying to put the album in its time and place and kind of thinking about, hair metal that came before and, what the future would hold. And I was thinking about like what 1991 was like politically, like Gulf War and,
end of the Cold War.
the disaffectedness. USSR is, falling apart. Right. And just like how unapologetic that drum kick is, right? Like it just kicks off. It doesn't try to soft pedal and like try to do any like, we're going to make something that's going to introduce people to what grunge music is. And we're going to get them there, in a comfortable way. It's really just like punch you in the face.
Yeah.
I was really shocked by that and thankful for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, JP.
Well, I was going to say, I love that the first image in the music video is a Chuck Taylor tapping to the beat, to the riff. And I'm like, here we go. It's started. But go ahead.
Yeah, because, so one thing I want to say about the song too is a couple of things. One is it's shockingly simple of a song to play on guitar. Like, it's a really easy song to play. The main riff is pretty much ripped off from Louie Louie, which I'll get to in a moment. And the verses is literally 2 strings. Like, you just 2 strings. I remember when I learned to play it, I was blown away at that. And then I realized it's like, oh wow, like this song really needs all the instrumentation, which is a key thing of the song, right? Like, so many rock songs are so guitar heavy, and like that riff, of course, is very timeless and very you just know it, and it's sort of the main thing behind the song. But the song is really, really like in its entirety, you know, the bass line and the drums, like just it fills it out. Without all of that, it's not the same song. I mentioned before we started, or we mentioned last week, that I really liked Tori Amos's cover of Teen Spirit, which she plays on piano. What I like about that is you can, when you hear her version of it, you can really discern the Pixies' influence in the song, which I had not really paid much attention to beforehand.
It's all throughout the album too, yeah.
Right, but then to read that Kurt himself felt that this was a very Pixies-esque song, like that's what he was going for. But I wanted to mention something about the Louie Louie thing. I've got this little theory that I've concocted about what makes alternative rock different. Because, you know, we have rock and we have alternative rock. And genre-wise, like you listen to it, it's not that different, right? You listen to Fear of the Dark by Iron Maiden, and it's a punk song. I mean, we call it speed metal, but it's basically a punk song. Yeah. So, you know, so this idea that like there's a difference between punk rock and like mainstream rock is, you know, it's sort of a negligible, you know, debatable thing. But my theory is that rock and roll, you can trace its development from rhythm and blues, and then first the blues, then rhythm and blues, and all of that, and that is all an African American musical idiom that began with African Americans, you know, stolen, brought over here, using Western European musical instruments, but from an African musical concept. And so it began to develop into this, a new sound. Elvis Presley famously stole this sound and made it mainstream. And so, so you've got, you know, white folks taking black music, and that's how it goes on. And then you've got a straight line from that to the kind of like similar kind of thing going on with the folk music that Bob Dylan popularized, which then got its way back to like the Beatles and helped influence the British rock invasion in the 60s. But there's a straight line that mainstream rock and roll has with its direct connections to black music. There is an outlier in all of this, and that is the Kingsman recording of the song Louie Louie. Most alternative rock musicians will tell you that was the first like garage garage song, right? This was a group of guys in Washington State that were recording outside the mainstream of music. They recorded the song in like one take in like a junky studio, and apparently the guy had to like yell upward into the microphone, and that's why the vocals are indiscernible, which led to a whole thing. But what's interesting about that song is that the guitar riff of that song, which has been used in so many rock, and it's like the basis of punk rock and all this kind of stuff. Like punk rock is basically the Louie Louie riff with the Bo Diddley beat. Is that riff, that song, was based on a Latin American piece of music. And so you've got, which that is similar kind of thing, which is where you have Western European, but Southern European music that has been reinterpreted through the slave paradigm that we had in North America. And so my little theory is that alternative rock has a bit of a Latin influence into it, that makes it sound just slightly different enough. And that when we're talking about these two things, that's where we're looking at these two musical traditions. And as a opening salvo for the alternative rock scene in the early 90s, Teen Spirit's great for that, because it is drawing on the definitive song of alternative rock, which is the Kingsman Louie Louie. So there's my little rock thesis.
Well, it's funny because I learned yesterday that the first song that Kurt Cobain ever learned how to play was AC/DC's Back in Black. And the reason and the way he was able to teach himself how to play is because he had discovered that Back in Black is just Louie Louie. Mm-hmm. And so he would just play Louie Louie. That's how he learned how to play Black in Black. Interesting.
Yeah,
so I think there's some truth to that theory, maybe.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, you know, there are definitely bands that were out there that were alternative rock beforehand, but they were pretty much relegated to the college radio scene, right? Yeah. I mean, you know, you can think of like Pixies, and they were doing a lot with distorted guitars. I mean, you can even think about like the shoegaze, like My Bloody Valentine, and how they were using distorted guitars, but like really low tempo and all that kind of stuff. You know, Nirvana.
Smashing Pumpkins,
especially with
like,
yeah. Nirvana
I
though.
love Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh man, I'm not gonna lie. Until we decided that we were gonna do favorite bands, for this year's Music Mayhem, I was so tempted to do Melancholy and Infinite Sadness, all like 3 hours of that album. Well, and I was even going to be a really pedantic about it, and like a real Charles Boyle-esque with it, and but do it in the vinyl order, because the vinyl order is different than the CD order, just to mess with you guys.
Oh jeez.
But no, I mean, Teen Spirit. I mean, everything that needs to be said has been said about it, I guess, ever.
Yeah, but I want to know how you feel. How do you feel about it? What did it say to your soul?
That drum beat, that get kicked at the beginning is so cathartic. It's just such a Patrick's right. I mean, it's in your face. There's no we had a pop song and you can start saying, oh, here's a little distorted buzzy guitar in this pop song or this pop rock song, or I mean, I guess arguably Guns N' Roses was a little grungy for a hair metal band, so there's a little bit of a precedent to kind of set the stage, but this is an opening salvo. And for them to put it as the first track, so many bands I noticed in the 90s, they put their lead, their big song as the third track on their record.
Yeah.
And this is right out the gate. I mean, it's a thesis statement. It is a you're with us or you're not with us. This is what's happening. And I think that's what endeared it to so many producers, for them to be willing and record and radio people to put it on the radio versus other alternative rock acts of the time, because it does not pussyfoot around, and it's ripping off the Band-Aid. This is what we're going to do now in terms of music. Well,
yeah, and I have to talk about this track, because as much as I absolutely love the album, the truth is this is the single track which I'm a good voice for the audience, because when it comes to music, I love songs, but my knowledge of bands and history is so lacking. It's shameful. Father Chuck here should write a book on everything he just said. So to follow up after him makes me want to just not talk anymore. But I said Citizen Kane, movie-wise, it's one of the first movies considered the greatest. But then I was talking to my wife, because I hit play last night and she came down and was talking, and because of the headphones and the music, I didn't realize she was in the room, so she scared the crap out of me when she touched me on my shoulder. I jumped and hit the roof. But so she's asking what I was listening to, so I started talking, and I specifically brought song again, and she's like, yeah, I think I remember that one, which she's our age also, in same era. I said, well, let me play the beginning for you. I hit play, and she's like, oh, I 1,000,000,000% remember that song. I said, I know you do. And then talking to her, I was like, probably what nails it more on, and in line with what Chuck was saying about there's stuff before it and that influences it. You said Guns N' Roses, right? Kind of laid the stage for them to come in.
Don't tell them that.
1,000,000%. That there's other bands out there doing things that laid the groundwork for them to do what they did. So probably a more fitting way to put this, and to hopefully put this into context, movies and with their audiences, Smells Like Teen Spirit is probably more accurately described not as the Citizen Kane of music, movie-wise, but the Matrix of music. There's so much that led up to the Matrix being made. But when we sat in the theater and we watched The Matrix for the first time, and a bullet was shot, and Neo leaned back, and the world around him slowed down, but he was still moving normal, and the bullet went over him, and we were all like, what just happened? And everything changed from that point on. Yeah. And my wife's like, oh, you mean kind of like The Greatest Showman, where he's singing a song and everybody jumps up in the air and they kind of freeze and they're going down really slow while he's walking through them singing. And I was like, exactly. That shot in The Greatest Showman probably wouldn't exist. Tricks didn't create bullet time.
Well, when I listen to Smells Like Teen Spirit, I definitely hear, not literally an anthem, but what could be an anthem of a generation kind of finally clapping back, right? Fighting back, or finally having their voice heard louder than anybody else around them. Like, here's a generation that's characterized by being ignored. You're not ignored anymore. And my favorite lyric in the entire song that I think is sort of climactic, and we're talking about the song that, like, you know, it's opening a salvo. It's the loudest voice at the time. You know, it's tearing down walls. My favorite lyric is at the climax the climax of the song. Oh well, whatever, never mind. Gen X energy right there, just summed up. And you know, Kurt would never say
it's
like
Kermit.
that. Yeah,
it's Kermit the Frog drinking his tea, right? It's oh well, whatever, never mind.
It's like I get to be at the top of the world, and I get to say, yeah, which is like a dream. Like it's that part of that dream of like wanting to be a billionaire and just driving a Volvo, right? Like, I'm gonna have all the power in the world, and I'm just not gonna do anything with it. You know, that'll
right.
show him. And you know, it's just, we talk about how dirty it is, and you know, their overall sound is and stuff. But you know, when you think about it, it's like it's anarchic, but there is so much focus behind it, right? Like Kurt is a very he's a surgeon with that guitar. And it's just,
I mean, literally a surgeon with the guitar. I mean, have you ever like looked at the technical specs of his guitars?
It's like a left-handed, right? It's a left-hander that he holds upside down or something, right? Or no. He's left-handed. Yeah, he plays left-handed, and it's a righty guitar, so he holds it upside down.
But all of his guitars were pawn shop and thrift store purchases that he like Frankenstein together.
Yeah. By
taking like pickups and bridges and pieces from others and putting them together. I mean, it's such a technical thing. Like a lot of punk rock, you know, punk bands are sort of like, you know, we're DIY, we do it ourselves. But that meant just like buying really crappy instruments and just playing them till they broke. Like Kurt actually took care in what he did. I mean, one of the most notable guitars that he owned was his electric acoustic that he used in Unplugged, which apparently is this like super rare guitar that only like 150 had ever been made. Yeah. But like he had no idea that it was a super rare, valuable guitar. He probably picked it up because it looked funky, because it had tuning knobs on the outside of the sound box, which a lot of acoustic guitars don't have. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you hear that, you know, everything is, and that's, I guess some people can be disillusioned with them, is that this was very strategic and calculated.
Oh yeah.
This really wasn't whatever, never mind.
Yeah, I think people think of like Kurt Cobain, he threw trash on the wall and called it art. No.
No.
He's super talented, you know.
Right. Well, and I mean, you get that with later songs, and we're going to get to Breed, which is a song I really want to talk about.
Oh yeah.
Because there's so many layers of musical influence that are in this, and they're filtered. But you just, if all you hear is a guitar distortion, you don't pick up on it. And that's sort of the genius of this, is that it's taking this like, he's taking this very like, it's sort of a rock education, but it's being filtered through like this distortion sound that you don't immediately pick up on. So the genius is actually as you start really paying attention to it, which is kind of the amazing thing about this band.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we move on, I need to sign off and say bye. I will see you all later, and let me know what the next album is.
All right, Father Fun, thank you so much for joining us. Good journey, my friend.
Peace, guys. To you as well.
I don't know. Do you guys have anything to say about In Bloom?
It has the unfortunate distinction of existing between Teen Spirit and Come As You Are.
Yeah. I love In Bloom because it reminds me of those kids who made fun of me. Because I feel like if they actually were Nirvana fans and actually respected Kurt Cobain, they wouldn't make fun of the fat kid.
Yes, I agree with you. What Chuck said is perfect, because JP just nailed the amazing impact of that song, and Father Chuck just perfectly nailed why none of us remembered that song. That song was on the album to begin with. That's awesome. Sorry, carry on. That's my input. Now the two of you have just finished what you were saying.
Well, I mean, I don't have too much to say. I just like it because that's what it makes me feel. It makes me think of those kids that picked on me. It makes me think of my friend who had that 14 karat gold version of Nevermind, which probably, I think if Kurt like knew about that, he probably would have fainted. So like the reason why it reminds me of the kids that made fun of me and my friend with a 14-karat gold copy is because it's the lyrics of he's the one who likes all of our pretty songs. He likes to sing along. He likes to shoot his gun, but he knows not what it means.
Yeah.
And I think that's I think that to me that is just about people who kind of misconstrue what they're doing, what they're about.
What I really appreciate about Nirvana is they really kind of kicked off this thing of like really expecting authenticity. Mm-hmm. And really, I mean, like Dylan and others had done that before, but there was this, this whole thing around like, if you're going to listen to our music, but like ignore what we're about, like there's an inconsistency there. And, for their second album, the second track off their second album, to basically give sort of like a middle finger to like the record industry. Cause I mean, that's basically what that song sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Is a very like audacious thing to sort of be like, you want this, you want to do all this stuff, but you don't think about any of it. Right. So it's starting to challenge you to think about that kind of stuff. I mean, it's almost kind of like several years later when Eminem released the his second album and opened up with the whole like, just really calling out his fans for being like obnoxious.
Yeah.
Which was what endeared Eminem to me. This was like, this is a thing that we saw in the 90s that I really appreciated, that push toward authenticity and to actually pay attention to the things you're doing. So yeah, that's In Bloom. Come As You Are.
Yeah, I do want to say about Come As You Are. I think it has the most killer solo. Mm-hmm. Out of maybe, I don't know out of the entire album, but I definitely know it for its solo. Which it's kind of funny. It's sort of a sin in punk rock to have a solo in your song, and they come from punk. But I don't know. What do you think, Chuck, about "Come As You Are"?
Well, I do kind of like that. I mean, it's an interesting song, right? Because the sentiment behind it is sort of what the alternative rock scene was all about. Was that it was we're music for the people that are not part of the mainstream. Come as you are, not There's also a bit of irony, right? Come as I want you to be, or whatever. But like. There's this idea behind it that it shouldn't be. That is, again, it's a song. It's about authenticity. At least that's the sense that I get from the song.
Interesting follow up to In Bloom.
Yeah, and it, but at the same time, right? Like that whole '90s thing, right? Of tolerance. Like we got to tolerate. Just tolerate each other. Yeah. But I remember the key question that was once asked years later, which was like, well, can you tolerate the intolerant? Right? Like there comes an element where's the limitations of this? And I guess like that's where on one hand, like it captures this ethos that was really big for the grunge scene, for the alternative rock scene, about sort of trying to embrace all these people that are different, right? Kurt himself playing for an AIDS benefit or for Nirvana playing for an AIDS benefit concert, for Kurt, as a kid, being friends with gay kids and even like accepting the fact that, people considered him gay because he hung out with a gay kid and just didn't care, but at the same time, there's like this piece of like, they were making fun of Axl Rose at the MTV Movie Award or the Music Award, the Video Awards or whatever. Yeah. There's this element of like where there's an aesthetic line, right? Like this is where you're come as you are, right? We want you to be like this, but if you show up wearing football pads or a jock, like I don't know if we really want you to come as you are. We kind of want you to like you're there's a sense that because you're not authentic. Yeah, you're only authentic when you look the way we look. So so that's a thing that goes in the back of my mind when I think about all of the grunge era and all of even Nirvana and all of that there were Kurt and others were struggling with the limits of this stuff even early on.
Yeah, I like what you said about how it's sort of kind of like opening up, kind of like a welcome people to like a scene. I kind of look at it as like you come and listen to us, kind of like a Pied Piper thing. But now I'm thinking, it's kind of like opening people like come to listen to alt rock, listen to grunge, listen to punk, like be part of this section of music.
Right, because rock
it takes
music,
you as who you are.
Right, I mean, think about it, like rock music by that point was largely possessed by the by the jocks, right? It was
Yeah.
possessed by the villains in like Pretty in Pink, right? I mean, like, you know, that is the best example, but like Pretty in Pink, right? The rich kids are listening to hair metal and have that kind of look to them. You know, it's Ducky and the Misfits that are listening to like new wave.
Yeah, drinking
right?
beers, riding motorcycles, hot girls dancing, like
yeah, like that's like the rock scene, and then you've got, you know, but now you've got this other musical scene out there that's of course coming from like the college educated types and all of that, and now like there's this sense that this is, you know, this is what the real authentic true people, not the sheep, you know. They're you know, sheep listen to this corporate music, right? And this became the thing that, I mean, I know for me was, and still is sometimes, like a definitive obsession of like being afraid of being called a poser.
Oh yeah,
and
I'm up all night thinking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you know. So, you know, it is kind of interesting that, like, I remember, like, Keelan, I wish Patrick were here because I hear I'm talking about Keelan. Remember, Keelan once made a comment. We were at the mall together, and a group of goth kids were walking around, and they all looked alike. And Keelan made this joke. He was like, oh, you're gonna, you know, he's like, oh, I'm an individual, but I look just like everyone else I hang out with. Right. Like, and I've just thought about that over the years, over all of this. Right. Because in the 90s, like, oh, I'm an individual. Don't judge me. Don't tell me how to dress. But you're going to just dress like all these other people that you hang out with. So like you're still conforming in a way.
We had the wrong idea about them. It wasn't about being an individual. It was about belonging to a community. I'm an individual within a community. You know?
Right. And yeah. And so I think that, you know, that there's all this baggage that's behind, you know, all of this, and this song kind of touches on it a little bit.
Yeah.
I realize if we go track by track, we're going to take forever.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't going to.
But
go ahead.
I gotta say before you move on to the next one and stop going track by track, because I'm going to run out of time. But I do have to say, this song to me, in a weird way, perfectly fits a conversation we were having about Kurt Cobain to begin with. About the concept of, like, I don't think he wrote his lyrics to be dissected and studied and broken down, and what does it really mean? I think he wrote them just for how did it make you feel. But then you hit this particular song to me that's so simple. There's like very few words in the song as a whole. It's so simple. And yet this is probably the one that I could write like my dissertation on, because it's so simple and yet so complex, and it's confusion about be who you are, but be who we want you to be. And then the end of it just makes no sense. By the way, I don't have a gun. Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and yet means so much at the same time.
Yeah.
So this is the one song on the album out of all of them that I feel like this is the one we could have spent a whole episode on trying to, what do we think he was saying, whether he knows it or not? This is the one track out of all of them, as simple as it is, that just like rocks my world from the beginning, when it says, come as you are, as you were, but as I want you to be. The second that line is stated, I can't even describe to you how I was like totally caught up in this song and totally lost in like this understanding of, yeah, what is this back and forth paradox, dichotomy, like fighting against yourself, trying to be an individual, but joining in, we accept you, but only if you're like us. Like this whole thing, I was just lost in it. And this is the one song that I'm not going to keep going on, but this is the one song that I could not talk about without attempting to like break down what the heck was he saying when these lyrics were put together, because there is a depth hidden there that I don't even think he necessarily intended in this one song. But it shows such a broken, split understanding of how individual, how do I accept people as individuals, and yet we all understand that I want you to be allowed to be yourself and expect me to be okay with that if you're not somewhat like me. Like, this song rips all of those apart, and that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I'm not going to dive into it, but carry on.
I mean, I feel like when I listen to it, I'm just like, okay, I'll come. I'm not going to worry about whether or not I fit or not. Like, yeah, okay. Yeah.
You're like, come as you are. Okay, done.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like that's probably
what
you.
As you are. Okay, fine.
Okay, the end.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned the gun part because that strikes me too. But I feel like to me that's like, it's like I'm not gonna make you do anything you don't want to do. I'm not gonna hold a gun to you. You know.
Interesting that 3 songs in a row he talks about guns, right? Teen Spirit, load up on guns, bring your friends. In Bloom, he talks about he likes to shoot his gun, doesn't understand why. And then this one, I don't have a gun.
And you know, little hey, bing, anecdote time. Kurt Cobain's parents divorced when he was very young, and his dad, not a nice person, just walked out on his mom, and his mom was so angry that what she did was she got all of his guns, his dad's guns, and threw them into the river to get back to him, to get back at him. And so Kurt went and got a guy, and he paid him a couple of bucks to help him fish out all the guns from the river, and he sold those guns to buy his first guitar.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's psychological layers right there, man.
Yeah.
Also, I was going to say, turns out, Kurt did have a gun.
Yes, he did. Yeah. Yeah.
Breed.
Anyway, so let's get into Breed because I'm excited because this is like you said in the messenger, Chuck, that you were like, you know, the ones after like the kind of the hits, they just kind of fall off, get kind of dull, but then all of a sudden Breed kicks in.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it was one of the. I was driving home. It was actually right after leaving recording last week. I was driving home and I was like, I'll put on Nirvana as I'm driving home and start listening to it. And I was like, that's when I was like, oh, In Bloom played. And I was like, I mean, it's an okay song, but man, like it just doesn't have, And then because it's between the 2 hits, and then Breed came on. I'm like, oh right, they're actually a really good band. What I love about Breed, and I think Breed to me is probably more than Teen Spirit a thesis statement on what grunge is. If someone's like, what is grunge? Play them Breed and then talk to them about it. Because what alternative rock was and the grunge in particular. Let's talk about grunge. Okay. So what grunge is that grunge is a post-punk musical genre. The people who liked it hated the term grunge, but it was a marketing term that was developed by Sub Pop Records, I think.
Yeah, probably.
And it was basically post-punk. These are musicians that had been a part of the punk scene that was big in like Minnesota and in Northern California and in the Washington area. And they started using punk sensibilities but slowing down the tempo. And so they're basically playing punk music but slower, which gets it into blues-esque territory. And so, but what's also happening with this is they're incorporating musical styles from other genres into it. And Breed is a perfect example of this because it has as a sort of bridge a surf guitar riff that if you don't really pay much attention to it, you don't catch it because it's so distorted. But if you're listening to the way Kurt is playing that, he's absolutely playing surf guitar, which is a style of guitar playing that was pioneered by a guy named Dick Dale, which involves playing really quick a loose pick between like 2 or 3 strings. So you get this like
Miserlou, the Pulp Fiction theme.
Yeah, that was a sound that Kurt Cobain, by the way, developed as a way to, that Dick Dale developed as a way to sound like jungle animals. And so like you have all of these sort of obscure fallen away musical genres being filtered through this particular audio technique of ultra distortion. So you've got a little bit of punk, a little bit of surf guitar, you've got, all of that. And so that's really what grunge is grunge is all of these different musical influences in this particular package. Totally. And Breed captures it perfectly. Also a bit of metal thrown in.
Oh yeah.
So, like when Kurt Cobain, he made a comment that he said that they wanted this album to sound like, what was it? Like the Kinks were molested by Black Sabbath.
Sounds about right.
That's this song is that. It is, West Coast rock, like 60s rock and roll filtered through 1970s, metal sounds, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, I definitely have always been kind of like affected by the metal aspect of it because of how much they were kind of going against metal. But you know, he loved Black Sabbath and he loved Led Zepp, so it's something that was kind of old school metal in there. So Matt, unfortunately, we're losing Matt. But before you go, is there like a particular song you want to talk about, or an aspect of the album, or anything you want to kind of drop some science on?
Because this album, in my opinion, has such a major effect on music, I will also say it drastically highlights how majorly unprepared I am to have a discussion about music with the two of you.
Okay, well then let me just ask you this, because this is the point. Because
I'm like, what?
Well, that's the point that I'm trying to make of how we're approaching this. I just want to know how you feel, buddy. Tell me how this album made you feel.
That's where I was going to go with this. I was going to say, good. I'm totally unprepared to have a music discussion with the two of you. So here's what I will say and how I will put it. I clicked play last night to start this song. The guitar riff kicked in. I was done. I listened to the album beginning to end. I would have listened to it more, but I had I got to go to bed. I got to wake up early. So I woke up to start work, and I may or may not have listened to it 4 times in a row throughout the day, just nonstop, this album. What I will say is this album, listening to it, takes me back as a 36-year-old, a person born around that era. It takes you back to a place where you were, that it's like, I can only describe it as like, almost like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe Nirvana? Like this feeling of just being completely lost in it as
elevated.
Soon as the guitar riff kicks in. It's like you're taken up to another level. Everything else was forgotten. And especially right now, JP, I have to applaud you. Can we just take a moment to applaud JP, whether Chuck wants to or not? He can just forget it. But applaud JP in the fact that no, you don't have to applaud yet. I haven't made my point. But during a global pandemic, when the world is lost and like, what the crap are we doing? Some of us are like, you got to open the economy back up because things need to get better. Some of us are like, you need to stay in your home for the next 70 years because it's important. In the midst of all of this chaos and confusion and like anger and frustration and trying to figure out what the heck is going on because we've never had anything like this, JP picks an album that I click play and I forgot about all of that while the album was playing to beginning or end. My only argument, the only thing I wanted to write him and send like the text equivalent minus an emoji, the verbal text equivalent of a middle finger is, it wasn't long enough because I was gone and I wanted to stay gone. Don't bring me back. I wanted it to keep going. This album has influenced things in ways that I don't even think I realized. No matter what genre you're listening to, with a few exceptions of stuff that literally didn't exist years ago because of technology and things we have now, like electronic dance music, didn't exist back then, so I don't know how much you can connect that to this. But with the exception of what technology brought into existence, everything else you're listening to was touched on by this, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
And by clicking play on it, I was immediately taken back to a more simplistic time when I was like, this is what I think, this is why I think it, and I'm going to listen to my music, and I don't care if you like it or not. And it immediately took me back to a world where things like COVID-19 and global pandemics didn't matter. It was just, who do I want to be? Why do I want to be that person? And how do I tell the world this is who I am? And it didn't matter what the world said back. This is who I want to be. This is how I'm going to get there. And this is who I am. Deal with it. And that's what this took me back to. And I was lost to the point where my wife almost gave me a heart attack when she touched my shoulder to tell me, by the way, the kids are in bed and you missed it. So just saying, that's my final thoughts on this. Is JP perfect pick during this. To the point where I have already warned JP that he's going to ask eventually what our choices are. And I said, I'm going to pick this one again, figure out how to do that.
That'd be pretty funny.
So, perfect pick, perfect timing. You nailed it with everything going on. For people who haven't heard it yet, go listen to it. I understand if you've never heard it before, I understand it's not going to have the impact on you, but you'll appreciate after hearing this how the reason it doesn't is because everything you've heard since then has influenced it. So you feel like you've already heard this before.
Right.
And that's okay. That's my point. For those of you who grew up with it and it's been a while, go click play. And I promise, go click play, put a pair of headphones on, turn it up so that you don't hear anything around you, and you will not regret it. The world is gone from the time the first song starts till the time the very awkward that I'll let the two of you talk about 6-minute song ends. It was just a perfect, I was gone, I didn't care. And it was the escape I wanted while also bringing me back to just so many thoughts, memories, and things that it was just great timing. So thank you, JP. I appreciate your choice. And I'm also glad that unfortunately I have to sign off, but I'm glad I get to do so before you ask me my choice, because I don't know how the heck I'm supposed to follow that up. So goodbye. I enjoy. Keep talking. Love you guys.
Good journey, man.
Good journey.
To our audience, good journey. And I will leave the two of you to wrap it up. So
all right,
see you
dude.
later.
See ya. Good journey. Okay, so like I really love Lithium.
Great song.
I think it might be like my favorite song on the album. It's just sort of like a personal choice. And to me, I just the song just feels like it's just like a representation of repression. And I know like Lithium is it's prescribed to like people with bipolar disorder, right? Is that kind of right?
I think so.
So it's probably it's. I mean, if we wanted to get analytical, he's probably talking about like mental disorders that he's probably dealing with and stuff, and going to the doctor and psychologist and things like that. But to me, it's just like it's a great representation of someone who is repressing themselves, repressing what makes them happy, repressing all these different feelings, and almost not so much. And what's interesting about it is that it's not just represented in the lyrics; it's kind of geniusly represented in the sound too. Because even though this is grunge, this is like post-punk stuff. It's like weirdly kind of do like you can go la la la, like it is kind of like an upbeat. It shouldn't be that upbeat, but because of the nature of the genre we're in, it definitely is sort of like a representation of repression. Like you're repressing the grunge by making it sound like almost like a nursery rhyme kind of thing. Like I'm okay, right. We're okay, everyone's okay.
Yeah, it's very sing-songy. And it's also, if I remember reading about it, this is the one that he started writing some of the lyrics based off of his experience of living with a born-again Christian family.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, of course, for like our podcast is an important topic of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And that sense of him like seeing religion as a kind of opiate type thing, like
right. Mm-hmm.
Light my candle because I'm trying to remember, was it
light my candle in a daze because I found God.
Yeah. That sense of seeing religion as just or maybe not saying, maybe it's not a statement about religion in general, but like his experience of some people with religion.
Yeah, he had nothing really against religion in general. He thought that like if you need religion, then you should use it. He wasn't particularly religious himself, but he was tolerant of it, because that's the kind of guy he was.
So, but by the way, interesting for him to kind of give that impression because he famously did the, Jesus don't want me for a sunbeam.
Yeah.
He covered Lead Belly, and one of the songs of Lead Belly's that he covered that I don't know if there's any recordings of it, but he covered was He Never Said a Mumbling Word, which is about Jesus being silent in the face of Pilate. It's a blues song, old blues standard.
And there's also his cover of Lake of Fire and his Unplugged.
Right. Right.
session.
So I mean, he's got like, there's a lot of, I mean, obviously the name of the band is a religious name. So it is interesting to me that this is a thing that's always sort of danced around with him. I mean, apparently he considered himself a born again Christian for a pretty brief period of time. When he lived with that family, and I could see like where like the kind of person he is, like he takes it like really strongly, right? Like this happens to a lot of born again people, right? They get born again, they get this lot of energy around it, and then suddenly like it fades out and it becomes empty, and they realize that it's sort of, a lot of people are using it as medication. It's a type of medication. So it's fitting that he would talk about it in a song entitled Lithium, because he had the perception of people using religion as a sort of medication thing. And that the larger story of his music and his lyrical stuff and just other things about him is this search, which we saw a lot of Gen X, is a search for authenticity and truth. Yeah. And that religion maybe could offer that, but unfortunately a lot of religious adherents don't seem to recognize that. And so it really kind of, pushed a lot of Gen X and others to, and I guess I would actually argue more our generation, we saw Gen X sort of throw their hands up and give up, but the rest of us were like, wait, no, there's merit in this stuff. Like there's truth in it. We just lost it. We just got to recapture it.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I think of this song now and it makes me think of social media. And it's interesting that you kind of brought up religion being the opiate of the masses, because, that's a Marxist theory.
Yeah.
But I feel like, and, people kind of bring that up towards like Christians who might identify as Marxists or who like his writings. And they'll bring that, what do you think about that? I was like, well, I think maybe he was correct at the time, but not today. I don't think religion is an opiate today, but we do have opiates, and I think social media is that. Like, I think of this song, and it just, when you look at people on social media, what is it? Everyone's happy. Everyone's has this idyllic life, Can
I just say, I like that we're talking about this.
Yeah.
Because maybe this could be a separate episode sometime, but like, right. Okay. So when we think of the 90s and we think of like that great Portlandia bit, the dream of the 90s is alive in Portland, when we think of that, right, that was the sort of thing that was kicked off by the alternative music scene. And kicked off this whole idea, right? Again, the come as you are, right? We're going to tolerate each other. And like that same ethos was around because the internet was a burgeoning thing. And so like the internet was coming out, and this whole idea, this idyllic idea of the internet, right? There's that great meme that's floating around right now of Bill Gates being like, imagine what people are going to be using their computers for in 30 years. And then, somebody shows something like ludicrous next to it. Yeah. But, there was this thing that like, we're going to finally envision this dream of people, basically the internet's going to be like this global coffee house where people of different ideas and ideologies are going to come together, and we're just going to share and understand, and we're going to hear each other and all of that. And now here we are 30 years after the fact or more. And we're talking about social media, which is basically a distillation of all of this 90s idealism, what the internet could be.
Yeah.
And it's either completely fake, it fosters a ton of depression. And the thing I thought about is that it's not encouraging. Right now, in the middle of this pandemic, right, this time where we need encouragement from one another as the best we can, all Facebook is people shaming one another, preaching and pontificating at one another, telling each other how you're wrong to believe this or do that or whatever, right? It's like,
or constantly reassuring that I'm okay, I have a great life. Do you have a great life?
Yeah.
Are you okay too?
Yeah, so it's interesting that there's still this thing, right? That there's, everyone has sort of found their lithium. Yeah. And, we're just going to keep on, I'm not going to quit.
Yeah. And it happens as the internet becomes more corporatized, as we have fewer spaces to go to. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Netflix, I guess. It's getting smaller and smaller by the minute, and these people are making more and more money. I mean, I would love, God, can you imagine like Kurt Cobain today, like in this day and age of the internet and stuff? Like, I visited I don't know why I never thought of this before, but I visited Nirvana's Twitter page today. There's an official Nirvana Twitter page, and it's like, it's just retweeting people. Like, I mean, and it's cute, retweeting like kids playing Nirvana songs and stuff, and like, oh, Kurt Cobain was mentioned in this magazine. Chris Novoselic is doing this with this band, and I'm like, oh man, this is like, I don't know. We're in a bad timeline. We're in a bad time.
Well, think about, right? Like, okay, Dave Grohl goes off and he makes Foo Fighters, and Foo Fighters is a very pop rock band, right? Like, they're very radio friendly kind of thing. Now they weren't when they started, but they are now. And that's Dave. I mean, Dave just seems like a pretty happy kind of guy.
He was yeah. He was always wanting to be a rock star from the beginning, you know.
Yeah. But I think about, right, like, according to Michael Stipe of REM, Kurt and him were starting to have conversations about what Nirvana's next album was going to be after In Utero, and they were thinking about going in a completely different direction that was more akin to Unplugged. Mm-hmm. And which, oh my gosh, I want to visit that timeline. Because I think he would have pissed off his fans. I think, because he was constantly trying to defy this being captured, this being contained. And, I think that, because, the story behind Unplugged is, of course, the MTV music, the MTV executives are furious that his set list doesn't include anything from Nevermind. And that he's got like Meat Puppet songs and Lead Belly covers and David Bowie. And, he's got Pat Smear up there. I mean, it's such a fascinating thing to read the backstory of that, and that he was just not going to give in. He was going to do what he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And they used Unplugged as a forum to do something really beautiful and unique musically. Yeah. And defy expectations and convention. And so I think, like, if Kurt were still around, we all either he would have just, he would have ended up angering people enough that he just sort of went off and just did his own thing and was just sort of quiet for a while.
Kind of like Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Or Perry Farrell. I mean, what's Perry Farrell doing these days?
I don't know who that is.
You know what Perry Farrell?
No.
Jane's Addiction, Porno for Pyros?
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Oh, JP.
I know.
Oh, JP. Anyway, but yeah, I think that it would have been it would be very interesting to see what the world would be like if Kurt had not ended his own life, and or did he?
I want to get to that, by the way.
Let's get to that. We're running out of time.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah, let's
I'm circling back. The reason why, I don't know if I made this clear enough when I was kind of going through my sort of relationship with Nirvana and Kurt Cobain. The reason why I stopped believing that is because I think, like I said, obsessing over that was me sort of taking away, not acknowledging his pain, and not acknowledging that depression is real, and that I may even have that connection with him. Not that I'm suicidal like he was or anything like that.
You don't have a crippling heroin addiction,
right? Which was used to self-medicate an awful stomach irritable bowel syndrome that he had that was like deathly painful for him.
Which, by the way, some people speculate was caused or at least exacerbated by the fact that he played guitar left-handed.
Really?
If he had played guitar, I read this years ago, that if he had, because apparently he was sort of ambidextrous, and he elected to learn to play guitar left-handed because he thought it was more of a challenge than to try to learn right-handed. Huh. And so he chose early on to get a left-handed guitar and to learn left-handed, and became a left-handed guitarist. But apparently, like, the posture you take when you play left-handed, with like where his condition was in his intestine, like that puts more strain on that side. And that basically, like, if he had played right-handed, he would probably not have had nearly the intestinal discomfort and the desire to self-medicate with heroin that he ended up having.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is insane. Yeah. Gosh, that'd be tragic if it's true. I mean, it's all tragic anyway, but like I was saying, like, me kind of coming to terms with like, this is just a stupid conspiracy theory. It's just, the conspiracy theory is that Courtney Love killed Kurt Cobain.
Right.
But like, if you just kind of look at Kurt.
Which her dad perpetuates, of all people. My gosh,
it's so weird. I mean, it's all stemming from like sexism, though. It's the same reason why people hate Yoko Ono. You know,
yeah.
Courtney Love wasn't a Yoko Ono character. Like, she hated Dave Grohl, but everybody hated.
And listen to Hole. Hole is much better than anything Yoko Ono ever put out.
Yeah. And you know, she wasn't like dividing the band or anything. Like I said, like she feuded with Dave Grohl, but like Dave Grohl like feuded with everybody. So like but like I said, sort of, I guess dwelling on the conspiracy theory, it just took away from. It was like I was ignoring that this pain exists, and it's like it's okay to acknowledge that yes, he was suicidal. He was battling horrible mental problems. He was also battling a horrible drug addiction and horrible physical pain. And these all contributed to one another. And to also accept that is to also accept that Nirvana is not just sad music.
Right.
You know, like you said, like he doesn't want people to just read into the lyrics. It just, you know, come up with your own meaning if you have to. Because they're also like a very funny group of people. They're hilarious. Right. There's a lot of humor in the music as well. And it's like I said, it just became like, no, these are people that like know what I'm going through, and they can give me something to do until the weather clears. And so yeah, if you believe,
it's an empathy piece, right? It's an empathy piece. It lets you know that there are other people that are feeling what you feel.
Right. And I think it's interesting. You know, we keep saying that he was, you know, this like voice of a generation. He was a prophet of Gen X and stuff, but you know, as the saying goes, he didn't want to be any of that. He just wanted to make good music, and these are his words: "We want to make good music, and if we get popular along the way, that's fine." And you know, of course, coming from that, once he did get popular, there were certain fantasies that came up. He did say at one point, Courtney Love says this in an interview in the movie that I watched. He said that like his fantasy after like Nevermind came out was that he's like, I want to make $3 million and become a junkie.
Okay.
Because that's, I mean, like I said, it's that idea that like I'm going to be at top of the world, and when I get to the top of the world, I'm just going to be like, throw it all away.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be corrupted.
Well,
I'm not going to be, you know, controlling. I'm not going to turn into these rock gods.
Well, there's that story, right, of how he, you know, there's a huge fight between him and Courtney when she came home with like a BMW or a Mercedes or something, and he like made her take it back.
I didn't know about that. That's funny.
Yeah. He like had this whole thing about that. Like, there's another good story too I heard about him where he was at a concert and he jumped in with the crowd and was crowd surfing, and in the process of that, someone stole his shoe or both of his shoes off his feet. Next night he's at rehearsal. They're warming up, you know, they're doing sound checks, and one of the engineers sees that he has just socks on. And he was like, "Oh, you barefoot or what?" He was like, "Oh no, they stole my shoes last night." And he was like, "You know you're a millionaire, right? Like you can go buy a new pair of shoes."
Yeah.
You know, like those kinds of stories about him are really fascinating because, you know, to see someone, and I guess like, that hits that ideal for a lot of us, right? Like, you know, for me, like if I were ever, you know, if I dream about if I were ever a millionaire, like the things I would love to do is to be able to like give money to like my family, or like to be able to just use the money to help people. Cause I always think it's cool. Like when people can do stuff like that, you know, there's always the fear that money corrupts you and that you don't actually do the stuff you say you want to do. But there is that dream, right? Like I get it, what you're saying, like that sense of like, I'm gonna make it on top. I'm gonna make all this money, but I'm just gonna completely defy expectations. Like I'm not gonna live, right? Like just random thought was, MTV Cribs, right? There's that, I think it's Redman, the episode with Redman where they go visit his house, and he's like actually like in Compton in like a house in the hood where the doorbell is actually, he has to touch two wires together to get the doorbell to work. And he shows all of his video game systems and they're just in a pile next to his bed. Like they're not like, I love that episode. And I don't know if it's a joke, but it's so fascinating to see. Here's this guy, you know, millionaire, you know, dude.
Yeah.
Keeping it real.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's who he was. And you know, and the big thing that sort of makes it even sadder is that, you know, he was able to have a child with Courtney Love, Frances Bean.
Right.
And that's when it everything was gonna really change for him. You know, you can read it in his journals and in his music, is that once she was born, he's like, that $3 million junkie fantasy just like went away. Because he wrote in his journal things like, you know, now that I have a child, whenever I see like a starving child in Africa on TV, I cry. Like if I just see or like a child crying, I'm like I'm in pain. Like that's what having children did to me. And so like he now feels like I've taken on like he called it the biggest responsibility anybody could have. And but you know, it's like you bring it with you. You know, if there's one thing I've learned about depression and trauma is like it doesn't matter where you go next, whether you become a billionaire or you just move on to a more stable life, it comes with you.
Right.
You know, and you have to learn, and sometimes you can't get rid of it. You just have to learn to live with it, and sometimes it wins. Or it just, I mean, I don't want to term it as like a fight, because I know some people are kind of against that. But yeah. Sometimes you just can't do it anymore, you know? And that's the sad reality of what happened to him. Yeah,
well, I mean, yeah, and that's right, like it's so easy to try to like point, oh, it was the heroin, or it was this, or it was whatever. But like, we don't know what being Kurt Cobain was in 1994, right? I mean, we don't know, because like you said, he had, you know, this, you know, crippling pain. He was somebody who never necessarily wanted to be famous, right? He didn't seek that out. Like
he said it happened to him.
Yeah, and then it happened, and then not only did it become famous, but then he suddenly became like the mouthpiece of a generation that he never asked for. To have that kind of pressure put on you, while you're just trying to live your life, and then you're also struggling with all this other stuff. I mean, to go one night from, you know, one day basically being borderline homeless to a millionaire, where your face is everywhere, like that would mess with anyone. Much less add all this other stuff to it. And so,
and yet we look at it as like the American dream, as like what we should all be vying for, you know?
Right. And yeah, and like until we have this whole thing about, right, like, you know, oh, he failed somehow because he took his own life. And it's sad and it's tragic. And, you know, I think that, you know, you wish that he could have found another solution, at least for the sake of Francis Bean's, you know, health, right? Like, you know, would have been better for him to just step away from the music and sort of do like what John Lennon did and focus on being a parent while, you know, other things are going on. Maybe Courtney, you know, focuses on her career while he becomes a stay-at-home dad. I mean, you know, our world would have been so much different if that had happened. But I also want to note, just as an aside too, that the whole thing about making him a voice of a generation, we've talked about this a little bit here and there in the past. It's a little racist, right?
Yeah, we've talked. Yeah, how when Gen X talks about Kurt Cobain being the voice of generation, it's usually like white people talking about it, and they talking
right.
About
I mean, when we think of
music,
you think of like, oh, 90s music is grunge, right? You go to the 90s radio station, and for the most part, I mean, they've changed up now where you hear, you know, like Biggie and stuff on there, but you know, but you tend to think of it. Yeah, I mean, I would argue Tupac was a bigger voice of the generation.
Although I will argue the flannel did make its way to hip hop, because
yes,
I mean, if you watch like movies and music videos, like Tupac is rocking the flannel, so it's that influence is still there.
To be fair, some of the flannel was gang colors.
Okay, that's also true. Basically, you know, this is one of my all-time favorite albums, and Nirvana is my all-time favorite band, and you know, I just I can relate to Kurt, and I'm not afraid to say that anymore, and I don't think anyone should be afraid to say that they relate to someone like Kurt Cobain. You know, we need to destigmatize things like depression and anxiety and suicide and gosh, what else is there else to say? It's just one of the greatest albums of all time, made a huge impact, and Nirvana forever. Long live Kurt Cobain. So, now we move on to the next Master of Divinity, who is going to choose next week's album. And since Chuck is the only person still here, he's going to be him.
By default. Here's the thing. We decided last week after JP picked Nirvana that we decided that we would focus Music Mayhem this time around on favorite artists.
Yeah.
So we're picking music from our favorites, right? So I'm going to just mention that in the past, right? Like the album that sort of kicked this whole idea off for me was Paul Simon's Graceland, and the whole idea of Music Mayhem was me listening to that album and being like, I have to talk about this. I want to introduce it to people who've never heard it, and just get that in front of us. So in the past I've liked to pick, either like famous albums that I've never really listened to, just to get into the, just to finally give me the excuse to listen to it and talk about it. Or things that I think are just gonna be fun to talk about. Like last year we talked about the Beastie Boys, which we had never done before. And, so they were such a big thing for a lot of us. So, or at least for two of us.
They were fun to talk about.
They were fun to talk about. So I've not actually picked anything that's legitimately my favorite, even though Graceland has probably become my favorite album of all time.
Okay.
I've not picked my favorite band.
Cool.
And I've never actually put that on the table for you all. Yeah. And so I'm here to say that next week we're going to listen to Frank Zappa. No, I'm just kidding. That would be cool though. Yeah. My favorite album, or my favorite band, is a group called Guster. And I won't mention why they're my favorite because that's what we'll talk about next week. Okay. Patrick Funston, Father Fun, is also a fan of this band, so we should have a good discussion about this group. Picking an album was tough. I'm going to do something that's our first, and that is the album I'm picking, provided we can actually find it. I think Patrick's indicating we're having some trouble maybe, but is our first live album.
Ooh.
It's I want us to listen to Guster on Ice. Which is their first live record that was put out. The reason for this is that they made a stylistic change between two of their most well-known records, Lost and Gone Forever, which is probably their best record, and then Keep It Together, which is the one that I first heard. I love songs from both of those albums. I obviously can't pick both, but Guster on Ice, that concert series, they played the big songs from those two records. So I felt like this would be a good way to introduce Guster to you all. And on top of that, they're one of the few bands that I feel like their live show is better than their recordings, than their studio recordings. And so the live show is such a big part of Guster and being a Guster fan. So I felt like I would risk throwing that out there too, so you guys will have to hear it in a live concert setting rather than in a studio album setup. So the record I'm picking is Guster on Ice by the band Guster. If we find out that, because Patrick said he was trying to look for it on Amazon or whatever. I don't know if it's on like Google Play or anything like that. I know some of the videos from the movie version are on YouTube.
Okay.
But then Patrick said, "Oh, hey, maybe I'll get the DVD," and the DVD is $380, which is interesting because I own it. It's on my bookshelf.
Wow.
So, unless that's just the DVD and not the CD DVD combo, I don't know. But anyway,
that's gonna be
that's our album
to look for.
Yeah, but in the event that we can't actually listen to this because it comes across as I'm being too much of a hipster, then we'll revise and you let me know, and then we can edit in something else in this episode. Okay. Because it'll either be Lost and Gone Forever or Keep It Together. Probably Keep It Together, just because it was the first one that I ever heard and made me fall in love with the band. So I can talk about that.
First backup album for Music Mayhem this year.
Yeah.
in case the initial album is too hipstery to find.
Hey, it's not as bad. It's like I said, I was going to do the vinyl version of Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness.
Yeah.
Which that would be a fun record to talk about.
Yeah. Cool. Well, also, cool. Go look for Guster on Ice, folks, and let us know where you found it, because we may have to.
Right.
Part of the fun will be looking for it, I think, maybe. All right, well, thank you so much, Father Chuck, and I want to thank Father Fun and Matt for making it out. Sorry they couldn't share more, but yeah, it's hard doing a podcast with 4 people in 4 different remote locations, all of whom, except for one, had children and are married.
During a global pandemic.
Yeah, during a global pandemic. Yeah, that's good too. So, thank you for listening, and be sure to join us again next week. Good journey.
Good journey.